So as we move into the spread of this gospel message out into the Gentile world, this is a really helpful chart. You're probably expected by now on page 198. Now I want to highlight some things for you on this chart. And just as a companion to the Panorama timeline, if you get into and interested in this part of the biblical story, let me recommend for you a book. It's called Paul, a Biography. It's by N.T. Wright. And he will take a lot of this material that we're going to fly by, and he's going to write as if it's a biography, the story of Paul's life. And it's really fascinating. It's really instructive, helps put skin on this person called Paul, bring him down to real life, because he seems like such this heroic figure that's in this old book, and it really brings to life the Apostle Paul. Now, with that in mind, I want to draw your attention to this chart on page 198. I want to give you some dates, okay? If we look at the crucifixion of Jesus, it's either in 30 AD or 33 AD. Paul's conversion experience, the Damascus Road, is probably toward the fall or winter of 33 AD. So within 6 months, we have the church beginning to spread. It's now spread to Samaria, and now Paul is going to be converted on this road to Damascus in Syria. So all of these events thus far are taking place within about 6 months of Jesus' death. And then we're gonna then fast forward the story in just a moment. And when we do, we're gonna be looking at this chart. So here's what I want you to write down. On the far left side on this chart, on the bottom of page 198, Acts 13 to 14, journey number 1. You can write the number 47 AD. Paul goes out on his first missionary journey, which we're going to turn the page in a minute, and we're going to come back and look at this story, in about 47 AD. So we're talking around 15 years after Jesus' death. Paul will spend about a decade in training, we might say, and just working in Tarsus of Turkey. He's just working, and he's spending time there. And so that's what we're going to see with Paul. And then we're going to see these journeys begin. So the first journey is going to be 47 AD, and the story is going to be told in Acts 13 and 14. It will conclude with Paul coming back to Antioch, and then we have the Jerusalem Council. And you can write down this date, 49 AD is when we date the Jerusalem Council. So this first missionary journey is before the Jerusalem Council in 47, 48 AD. We're going to see a map in a minute of what this journey looked like. The second missionary journey of Paul will then begin in Acts 15 through 18, and that's going to be about 50 to 53 AD. So you can write Acts 15 to 18, that's 50 to 53 AD. And then his last missionary journey, Acts 18 to 21, is going to be 53 to 56 AD. And that's going to be his final missionary journey. Then we're going to pick up the story as we go. He will conclude this chart, and you can put 60 AD at the far right column. That's when Paul will be imprisoned in Rome. He's actually going to spend a couple years in prison in Caesarea Philippi and in Israel. So Paul's going to have a couple of different imprisonments that we're going to look at, but his Roman imprisonment will start in 60 AD. So this chart takes us from 47, his first journey, to 60, his Roman imprisonment. Now, before we zoom to Paul's life, let's get back to the spreading. Remember, we're looking at the gospel from Great Commission, Pentecost. Then we're talking Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. That's Acts 8, 9, and 10. And then in chapter 10, we're going to see the gospel then move out to the Gentile nation, the Gentile people around. Notice it, page 199. We see the conversion of Cornelius. And he is a centurion. That means he is a Roman general. He is in charge of 100 soldiers. He's going to receive a vision. And Peter the apostle will be sent. Remember, this is the same Peter who denied Jesus, the same Peter who was restored by Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. Peter is sent, and in this encounter, Peter's going to have his eyes open to see that, yes, the message of the gospel, the story of Israel, has culminated in Jesus, been fulfilled in Jesus. This thing called the church is where God dwells, but that thing is going out into, yes, the Gentiles. And look how Peter responds to seeing this vision in Acts 10. It says, he opened his mouth and he said, "Now I get it. I understand that God shows no partiality, but that in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him." And by the way, how do Jews and now Gentiles interact with each other in this thing called the church. That's going to be a major backdrop for a ton of our New Testament letters, and what's in them is how do people that have been hostile and hated each other for centuries now get along. And we're going to see that develop in most of Paul's letters. As the gospel begins to break new ground in Gentile territory, they're experiencing more and more intense persecution. And if you look at page 199, we're going to see the martyrdom of James. This is going to be John's brother, one of Jesus' disciples. It says, at that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Notice what's happening. We have Peter in prison. We have James, John's brother, killed. And yet the gospel is still breaking new ground. And once again, we highlight that picture that this is how the gospel spreads. Now, we're going to see the journeys in a minute. We have the witnessing in Jerusalem, then Judea and Samaria, and now to the ends of the earth. Turn the page. Here are Paul's missionary journeys. I'm sure your Bible has these in the back. And you can write on the map of Paul's first missionary journey, write 47 to 49 AD. That's this journey. Notice where he goes. Paul's home-based church is in Antioch of Syria. And this first journey will be through the area we know as Galatia. At the end of this particular journey, Paul will then arrive back in Antioch and write his first letter, this letter to the Galatians. And you can see it makes perfect sense. He's just visited those churches. He's now hearing of some problems going on in Galatia, namely that they're having trouble with the Jew and Gentiles getting along. And he's going to write Galatians. It's his most, we might say, kind of angry, off the cuff, he's spouting off letter, and he sends it to those churches in Galatia. And that's the occasion for Galatians. Then Paul will go on his second missionary journey. And notice, this is when the gospel will break through into the continent of Europe. As they move into Macedonia, you can see, to this place called Philippi. Paul will spend 18 months in this second missionary journey. And by the way, your dates for that are 50 to 53 AD. You can write that there on his second missionary journey. He will spend 18 months or so in the city of Corinth. And so from Corinth, he will write letters back up to both Philippi, so that's the letter we now know as Philippians, and he will write the first and second letters to the church in Thessalonica, which is what we now know as 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. And so he is then spending that time in Corinth. He makes his way back home to Jerusalem on this journey. He's carrying some things down to Jerusalem, then he makes his way back to Antioch. That's a second missionary journey. His third missionary journey will be, the highlight of this missionary journey is the Ephesian church plant. Notice on the third missionary journey, and by the way, the dates for that are 53 to 56 AD. You can write those down. He will spend a couple of years in Ephesus, in Ephesians, and that's where we get the letter to the Ephesians will be in that city. Ephesus was essentially, think of it as like the Los Angeles of its day. Corinth was like I'm trying to think of like Vegas, but bigger, like a more important Vegas, like a decadent, lust-filled city. What happens in Corinth stays in Corinth kind of thing, but it was bigger. It was more important. Vegas is kind of a small town with lots of visitors. Corinth was an important commercial city. So Paul will spend on his third missionary journey years in Ephesus. He will then, some Bible scholars think that he will be imprisoned in Ephesus sometime in probably about 55 AD. I am one of those that would agree with this, and it is from that imprisonment that Paul will write his what we call prison epistles. They are Colossians, Philemon, Ephesians, which he's writing to those who are around him. And so he'll write those letters right there to this surrounding people, those letters, Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon. And then he'll have the continued journey and down to Jerusalem. And then you see the last map is Paul's, we might call it his prison journey to Rome. So that gives you the picture of Paul's journeys. And now what we have is the story as it unfolds biblically. And with that, let's pause and we'll take a look at it.